Together with scenes of Oriental harems and scenes of Oriental despotism, the Muslim paradise was one of the favorite topics of a school of European painters of the 19th century called the Orientalists. And these Orientalist painters found those topics of the Orient especially interesting, that were either appealing and exotic or especially repelling. And I want to show you a couple of examples of Orientalist paintings of the Muslim paradise. This is Le Rêve du Croyant, The Dream of the Believer, by the French painter Achille Zo. Zo was a famous painter of his day. Later in his life, he became the director of the School of Fine Arts in Bayonne and in Bordeaux in France. What you see in this painting is an old Arab lying on a couch, fantasizing about the pleasures that await him in paradise. Naked girls, the famous houris, are shown, they sing and dance, and they embrace the male inhabitants of paradise, the rejuvenated Muslim men. Look at the bottom right corner. Note that the water pipe there occupies a very prominent place, and that is no coincidence. The Orientalist painters regularly connected the idea that Orientals were passionate smokers and often of hallucination-inducing drugs with the image of a very sensual and sexually charged paradise. This is another example, The Dream of a Eunuch, by also a French painter, Dunoui. And what you see here is a view from the roof of one of the buildings in Cairo. In fact, it is the Cairo Citadel. A man looking down, dreamlike, to the famous Sultan al-Hassan Mosque on the square in front of the Citadel. And a houri of paradise has appeared to him from the smoke of his pipe. But she is accompanied by a little angel carrying a knife. The knife reminds the dreamer that he is a eunuch, and that his dream of union with the beautiful houri will have to remain unfulfilled. The image of the lazy and opium-smoking Oriental suited European colonialist ideology, because on the one hand you had the strong, dominant male European power, but on the other you had the effeminate, or in the case of the eunuch, even the emasculated Oriental. Nowadays, Orientalist paintings have gone a bit out of fashion, but there still is a sense of Western criticism, but also a fascination with the Muslim paradise. And since 9/11, you will often hear about the 72 virgins, for example, that await the Muslim believer in paradise, and all the other sensual pleasures that are in store for him in the garden. But is this purely an invention of the Western critics of Islam? How is paradise imagined in the Islamic tradition? According to the Quran, the inhabitants of paradise live a life of luxury and of ease. It is generally true that Islamic art hesitates to depict religious topics, but there are some examples of depictions of the Muslim paradise, and I will show you a couple of these now. The blessed in paradise wear garments made of silk and brocade. They live in palaces and beautiful houses. They eat delicious fruit, dates, grapes, and pomegranates. And in fact, the fruit clusters lower themselves over their heads into their reach. They also eat meat and fowl, and they drink wine, which very conveniently does not give them a hangover. And it is in this general context of a banquet that also the houris, the famous houris, make their appearance in the Quran. The Quran says that the inhabitants of paradise are wedded or married to these maidens. In sum, it is impossible to deny that the Quran paints the picture of a paradise that gratifies the senses on all levels. But let me make two observations to put this a bit into perspective. The first observation is that the idea of a sensual paradise seems to be a problem not so much for Muslims, but for Westerners who continue to live with the idea of original sin. the idea that Adam and Eve passed on some kind of innate depravity and sinfulness to all their descendants. Now compare this to the Quran. The Quran says that Adam and Eve were banished from paradise, but, I quote, "Thereafter his Lord chose him," that is Adam, "and turned again unto him, and he guided him." So the point here is that according to the Quran, Adam was forgiven and cleansed from his sin, so that he could not pass his sin on to his descendants. So in this sense, you might say that paradise was never fully lost in the Islamic tradition. The second observation to be made is that sensuality plays a relatively minor role in comparison to other joys experienced in the Muslim paradise. For example, the joy of spending time with friends and family. But by far the greatest joy is purely intellectual and spiritual, and that is the vision of God in paradise. Now, this is something that Muslim artists never dare to depict, but a sense of it is there in Muslim architecture sometimes, when Muslim architects try to bring this joy down to earth, if you like. And a famous example of this is the Taj Mahal in India. The Taj Mahal literally means the crown of the realm, and it is a mausoleum dedicated to Mumtaz Mahal, the wife of the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. The grieving emperor had this building, this magnificent building, built after the passing of his beloved wife. There are more Quranic inscriptions on the Taj Mahal than on any other Muslim tomb complex. And these inscriptions are done in exquisite calligraphy, and they scroll over the arches, the walls, and over the tomb itself, which is located at the center of the Taj Mahal. And the verses that are used in these inscriptions are selected in such a way that it becomes quite clear that the emperor intended the building to mirror the heavenly paradise. For example, over the southern arch of the building is written a verse from the 89th chapter or surah of the Quran, which says, "O soul, return to your Lord, pleased and accepted, enter into the garden of paradise." And there are many more such verses spread over the entire building. The Taj Mahal is in fact an open book. It's a book to be read. It's a book that both describes and embodies paradise. So in conclusion, there's much more to the Islamic paradise than what is visible to the Western eye. And I feel it's important to study this tradition for various reasons. It is important not just Muslims generally believe that they will enter paradise in their future lives, but because this is a paradise that is also a utopian space. And the ways in which people construct their utopias tell us a lot about how they see life in the world of the here and now. Anybody who wants to share impressions or give feedback, feel free to get in touch with me and check out the information on our project's website.